The desert begins not with emptiness, but with silence. A silence so deep it hums. When you first open your eyes upon it, the horizon is blurred by heat, and the sky is a sheet of pale gold that seems to stretch without end. The air trembles, as if the earth itself is exhaling. You feel, instinctively, that this place has existed far longer than memory, and will remain long after memory is gone. Here, in this expanse of sand and stone, a civilization once bloomed, improbable, stubborn, brilliant. Ancient Egypt was born not from abundance, but from discipline. Not from lush forests or gentle rains, but from a single, merciful river that refused to die. The Nile. Every year, the river rose from its bed, flooding the land with silt, the color of ink and clay. The Egyptians called this black soil Kemet, the fertile land, the pulse of life. It was where barley grew thick and papyrus whispered along the banks. But beyond that narrow ribbon of green, everything else was desolate. The Red Land, the land of sun, sand, and silence. Death's own country. To live in Egypt was to live forever, between those two worlds, the life-giving and the lifeless, the green and the gold, the pulse and the pause. If you stood by the river at dawn, you would hear the day waking. The slow creak of wooden boats, the splash of oars dipping into calm water, a chorus of ibis calling to one another across the reeds, the scent of the morning's first fire, a mix of smoke and bread and wet clay. Somewhere far off, a woman would be grinding grain on a stone slab, her rhythmic movement matching the eternal rhythm of the river. It was a world bound by time and ritual. The sun's rising was not just a moment, it was a god's return. The Nile's flood was not weather, it was divine mercy. Even the act of plowing or kneading bread carried sacred meaning. Every movement, every shadow had its place in the cosmic order. The Egyptians called Mat truth, balance, the harmony that held the universe together. And yet, beneath this devotion, there was struggle. The paintings on tomb walls show banquets, dances, golden boats, and smiling faces. But behind those perfect scenes were people. Farmers, bent beneath the sun. Potters shaping endless jars for the dead. Laborers hauling stones across the sand. Their names are mostly forgotten. Their sweat, their laughter, their exhaustion, all vanished beneath the weight of history. Still, the desert remembers. It keeps whispers hidden in the wind. Sometimes, when archaeologists dig deep enough, they uncover more than objects. They uncover breath, the breath of those who built eternity one hammer strike at a time. So tonight, we will listen for them. We will descend into the valley where the kings sought immortality, and where the men who gave them that immortality carved their own short fleeting lives into stone. We will walk through the dust and the darkness, into the echoing corridors of a world both divine and painfully human. If you find comfort in these quiet wanderings through forgotten time, consider subscribing. Not for numbers or algorithms, but to keep this soft light burning. This channel exists as a sanctuary of slowness, a place where history unfolds like a lullaby, where we can drift through centuries without needing to arrive anywhere. Now, let us go back to the 13th century before Christ. The air is heavy with heat. The cliffs glow orange in the morning light. The sound of chisels rings faintly in the valley. This is where the tomb builders live, and their story is written not in gold, but in dust. Why it sucked to be a tomb builder. Stone dust, heat, and divine deadlines. When the first light of morning creeps across the western desert, it does not rise gently. It slides across the limestone cliffs like molten gold, sharp and unrelenting. The cliffs surrounding Deir el-Medina turn the color of warm honey, and the shadows that stretch between them are still cool, still full of last night's whispering wind. The workers wake to that color, to that silence, and to the familiar ache in their backs. There is no alarm bell, no call. Only the rhythm of necessity. A man sits up on his thin mat of woven reeds, rubbing his shoulders, feeling the grit of dust in his hair, the tightness of his muscles after a night's rest on stone. He can already smell the morning fires, barley bread baking in clay ovens, the faint sweetness of date syrup, and the heavy smoke that hangs low in the cool air. His wife is kneeling near the doorway, grinding grain with slow, practiced motions. The sound, stone against stone, is steady, soft, hypnotic. She looks up only once, meeting his eyes without speaking. They've shared this ritual every day of their lives. Words would be redundant. Outside, the village is alive but quiet, like a hive before flight. The narrow alleys between houses echo with muffled footsteps, with the clinking of tools being packed away, with the short greetings of men who all know one another's faces, one another's strengths and tempers. The walls of their homes are low, sun-bleached, patched again and again with the same mud they walk on. Chickens scratch the dust. A stray cat sits in a patch of early light, watching the men pass as if she has seen 1,000 such mornings, and she probably has. Each man carries his tools in a small leather bag. Chisels, mallets, polishing stones, brushes made from reeds. Some tie a strip of cloth around their head to keep the sweat from running into their eyes. Others wear amulets for protection, small carvings of Horus or Base, gods of safety and humor, in a world that rarely felt safe or kind. On their shoulders hang water jars made of goatskin, already heavy, already precious. They know how little water there will be later, how quickly the desert drinks it all away. They walk out of the village in a line, toward the Valley of the Kings. The ground is rough, the air already bright. The cliffs rise like petrified waves around them, cut into strange shapes by centuries of wind. With every step, the sand gives slightly underfoot, whispering as it slides back into place. The only sound beyond their footsteps is the faint tapping of someone's mallet echoing from far ahead, a promise of the long, slow rhythm that will fill their day. When they reach the entrance of the tomb, the light changes. The open desert vanishes behind them. They step into darkness. The tunnels are narrow and unfinished, breathing heat. The air feels alive, almost thick enough to touch. Each man lights his clay lamp, a small bowl of oil with a wick of twisted flax, and the walls around them begin to glow, painted in soft orange light. Dust floats in the air like smoke, shimmering in that dim, trembling glow. And then the sound begins. Tab. 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 The reign of Hatshepsut, the calm power of Egypt's forgotten queen. The desert holds memories the way the sea holds salt, invisibly, completely, forever. Every grain of sand in the Theban cliffs carries the trace of those who once walked beneath the unrelenting sun. In this quiet, shimmering landscape, time feels heavier, slower, softer. The world does not shout here. It hums. It is in this hush, between the heat of the day and the cool of the early dawn, that a story rises like the mirage of a woman whose power came not from conquest, but from serenity. Her name was Hatshepsut, the woman who became pharaoh, the calm ruler of a restless land. The morning in Thebes begins with silence, broken only by the low notes of flutes drifting through the courtyards. The air smells faintly of dust and lotus, the scent of ritual, of things both sacred and ordinary. The palace columns stand like sentinels, their surfaces cool to the touch, carved with lines of ancient hymns. Slaves and scribes move quietly through the halls, their footsteps brushing against the polished limestone floors. Outside, the Nile glimmers like a living vein of blue stone, winding its slow, eternal path through the desert. The city wakes with reverence, for this day, like every day under her reign, begins in balance. Hatshepsut was born of royal blood, daughter of Thutmose, the first and Queen Amos, destined for the margins of power. Yet destiny, like the Nile, sometimes changes its course. When her husband, Thutmose II, died young, the throne should have passed to his son, a child too young to rule. For a time, Hatshepsut ruled as regent, but slowly, carefully, she began to step beyond the boundaries drawn for her. She did not seize power. She absorbed it, one decree at a time, one ritual at a time, until the crown no longer felt borrowed, but hers. In the sacred heart of Karnak Temple, beneath the towering columns where sunlight falls in golden shafts, Hatshepsut stood before the priests and gods. Her body, draped in linen so fine it shimmered like mist, moved with deliberate grace. The air was thick with incense, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, the same scents that would later define her reign. Before the statue of Amun-Ra, she made her claim not as a usurper, but as a chosen vessel. "I am the daughter of Amun," the inscriptions say. "He has fashioned me for kingship." The priests bowed, and Egypt's order, the delicate balance between earth and divine, shifted quietly. From that moment, she was pharaoh, not a queen beside a man, but pharaoh in her own right. Depicted in the royal regalia of kings, complete with the false beard and Nenes crown, her statues show her both ways, as a woman with soft curves and as a man with broad shoulders, depending on the context. It was not disguise, but transformation. She understood that power in Egypt was visual, and to rule, she had to become the image of continuity itself. Yet her reign was not one of wars or unlike other rulers who etched their victories in blood. Hatshepsut built peace. Under her guidance, Egypt entered one of its most prosperous eras. Trade routes reopened, art flourished, and the kingdom's wealth expanded not through conquest, but through connection. Her ships sailed down the Red Sea, toward the mysterious land of Punt, a place of fragrant resins, exotic animals, and trees that oozed gold-colored sap. The reliefs at Deir el-Bahari showed these scenes in exquisite detail. The ships laden with treasures, the smiling emissaries, the lush trees swaying in the foreign wind. Imagine the port of Thebes on the day those ships returned. The city gathers by the docks, eyes wide as sailors unload the gifts of Punt ivory, incense, gold, and fragrant woods. The air fills with the smell of cinnamon and the chatter of awe. Hatshepsut watches from the terrace above. Her expression calm, unchanging, yet her presence radiates something profound. Not the noise of triumph, but the quiet satisfaction of order restored. To her, this wealth was not mere luxury. It was proof of divine favor, a sign that the gods smiled upon the balance she had brought to Egypt. Her architectural legacy remains one of the most beautiful in human history. The Temple of Deir el-Bahari, nestled against the cliffs of western Thebes, rises like a hymn carved in stone. It does not dominate the landscape. The Book of the Dead, the strange comfort of Egypt's beliefs about eternity. Night falls differently over Egypt. The desert, so harsh by day, becomes gentle under the stars. The wind that once burned now cools the skin, and the dunes, pale and endless, seem to breathe. From far across the river, the call of a priest echoes from the necropolis of Thebes. Long, drawn out, resonant. It is a reminder that even in the stillness of darkness, Egypt is awake in its thoughts of eternity. For to the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending, but a pasake corridor lined with symbols, guarded by silence, and illuminated by the steady flame of faith. In this land of unbroken ritual, life and death were never separate. The farmer plowing the flooded soil, the scribe bending over his papyrus, the queen adjusting her golden collar, all lived with the same quiet understanding that their days were only the first chapter of a much larger story. The horizon, to them, was not a limit, but a doorway. The sun itself demonstrated the pattern each day. Dying in the west, reborn in the east, forever circling back, forever promising return. To live in Egypt was to live inside a theology of renewal, and at the heart of that belief stood a single, extraordinary text, the Book of the Dead. It was not one book, not in the way we imagine it now, but a collection of hymns, prayers, spells, and confessions, fragments of a divine map for the soul. Each line was meant to help the dead navigate the treacherous paths of the afterlife, to speak the right words, to open the right gates, to know the names of the gods who guarded each threshold. The Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, for it was not about descending into shadow, it was about emerging into light. In a tomb deep within the cliffs, by the faint flicker of oil lamps, a scribe dips his red pen into ink made from soot and Nile water. His hand moves slowly, reverently, tracing curves of hieroglyphs across papyrus. Each symbol carries weight, each line a promise. He writes for a soul, not a name he knows, but one he honors. Perhaps it is for a noblewoman who loved her garden, or a merchant who once traded incense on the Red Sea. To ascribe it makes no difference. Each human life deserves safe passage. He pauses occasionally to whisper the words under his breath, as though ensuring their power will hold when spoken beyond the veil. Outside, the stars burn with steady light. They were gods too, to the Egyptians eternal watchers, marking the path of the soul across the sky. For them, death was a journey of orientation, of finding one's way through a world that mirrored this one, but reversed and flooded with divine presence. In that mirror world, one had to speak correctly, act purely, and maintain balance. The sacred concept of Mahat, truth and order. To lose balance was to vanish. To uphold it was to live forever. Among the most haunting images in all of Egyptian belief is the weighing of the heart. In the Hall of Two Truths, the soul stands before Osiris, god of the dead, while Anubis, the jackal-headed guide, holds a scale. On one side, the heart of the deceased. On the other, the feather of Mat. Thoth, the god of writing, waits to record the verdict. The hall is silent except for the faint beating of wings and the soundless pulse of anticipation. If the heart is light, if the person lived in harmony with truth, it balances with the feather, and the soul moves on to paradise. But if it is heavy with deceit or cruelty, the monster Amit devours it, and the existence ends forever. What a strange comfort, then, that they believed this process to be fair. No one was condemned by birth or status. The gods weighed the heart alone. Even a pharaoh could fall, and even a servant could rise, all depending on the purity of their truth. Tiswa Segipit, Esquire Revolution. Beneath its divine kings and temples of gold lay a moral democracy of the soul. In a world of rigid hierarchies, eternity was the one place where balance ruled above power. The Book of the Dead does not frighten when you read it. It soothes. It speaks to a civilization that faced death not with despair, but with preparation. It lists not punishments, but instructions. How to speak to the gods, how to cross the lake of fire, how to recognize the gatekeepers' names, how to reclaim your own identity when shadows pressed close. Every spell begins with a voice, a declaration of self. I am pure, the soul says. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. It is not arrogance. It is remembrance. A soul reminding itself of what it once was. Imagine the burial chamber, narrow, silent, flickering with lamplight. The coffin rests in its niche, painted with eyes so the dead may see. Around it, jars of oils and wine, carved as Shabdi servants, small wooden boats for the journey ahead. And beneath it, the scrolls of the Book of the Dead, rolled carefully and sealed. The family weeps quietly, but not in fear. They believe that, even now, the spirit is awakening, standing at the threshold of another dawn. For them, the afterlife was not an unknown void, but a continuation of what they loved most. The smell of the lotus, the warmth of the sun, the music of flutes at evening, the field of reeds. Their heaven was not made of clouds or fire, but of fertile soil and gentle rivers. A place where one could plow again, eat again, sing again, and feel the touch of wind on the skin. Their paradise was simply Egypt, perfected, eternal, abundant, and without sorrow. This vision of eternity reveals something profound about their hearts. They did not crave escape. They craved permanence. They did not dream of new worlds, but of keeping the beauty of this one forever. To die, in their faith, was not to leave the Nile. It was to merge with it, to flow endlessly with its cycle of death and rebirth. That is why the temples and tombs face the west toward the setting sun, where life descends into shadow, only to rise again renewed. And so, the Book of the Dead is not really about death at all. It is about memory, balance, and trust in the unseen. It is a manual for remembering how to live truthfully, so that one may die peacefully. The papyrus, the hieroglyphs, the rituals, They were all ways of saying, "We believe that what is good does not vanish. Even the smallest kindness ripples across eternity like the Nile's current, touching shores unseen. If you stand now inside one of those tombs, the air's still, the painting still bright after 3 millennia. You can almost feel that faith pressing against the walls. The painted figures walk calmly through the next world, their hands open, their eyes serene. The hieroglyphs shimmer in the torchlight. The gold leaf glows faintly, and in that hush, you begin to understand. They were not obsessed with death. Inside the pharaoh's court, ceremony, politics, and perfumed stillness. The palace of an Egyptian pharaoh was not built for comfort. It was built for eternity. The air inside was heavy with incense, and cool from stone walls that had absorbed centuries of sun. Columns rose like papyrus stalks, painted in deep greens and ochres, their carved capitals opening like blossoms toward the ceiling. In that filtered light, everything seemed to move slowly, servants gliding on silent feet, guards standing as still as statues, courtiers whispering in measured tones. Time, inside the palace, obeyed different laws. It bent itself around the presence of one man, the living god, the pharaoh. To live near a pharaoh was to live within a ritual. Each day began not with the cry of birds, but with the sound of music, flutes, and soft drums, played as the ruler awoke. Priests entered first, murmuring prayers to Ra, ensuring that the sun's rising and the king's breathing remained in harmony. Attendants anointed his skin with perfumed oils, dressed him in linen fine as spider silk, and placed upon his brow the double crown of upper and lower. Egypt, a symbol that he alone held the balance between life and death, order and chaos. Outside his chamber, a line of petitioners already formed, each waiting to offer tribute or plea, hoping their words would reach divine ears. Imagine the scent of that world, sweet with lotus, sharp with resin, touched by the faint mineral smell of limestone. The courtyards shimmered with heat, yet within the colonnades there was shade, and the sound of water trickling from shallow pools. Cats prowled lazily, sacred and unbothered, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The palace was not loud. Its power came from stillness, a stillness that made every whisper carry, every gesture meaningful. To speak before the pharaoh was not merely to communicate, it was to perform a ritual act. Words themselves were sacred in Egypt, for creation began with speech. At the heart of the palace, the throne room stood like a sanctum of silence. The throne, made of gilded wood and inlaid with lapis and ivory, sat upon a small dais beneath a canopy embroidered with stars. Behind it, on the wall, the sun disk of Aten gleamed faintly. When the pharaoh entered, the courtiers prostrated themselves, faces to the floor, waiting for the subtle signal that allowed them to rise. His voice was rarely raised. It didn't need to be. His presence was the law, his breath the will of the gods. Yet within this sanctity of order, there was tension, not shouted, but ever present. Beneath the perfume and ceremony flowed the quiet currents of ambition, envy, and survival. Scribes kept records not only of taxes and decrees, but of glances, alliances, and missteps. Generals and viziers measured their words as carefully as their loyalty. In this golden cage of protocol, one false phrase could unravel a lifetime of favor. The palace was not unlike a desert itself, vast, beautiful, and perilous for those who lost their sense of direction. The pharaoh's court was also a place of spectacle. Festivals of the Nile or the Opet processions filled the avenues outside with song, banners, and the scent of roasting meat. But within the palace gates, the rituals remained precise, deliberate, solemn. The pharaoh appeared in public as the embodiment of divine order, not laughing, not weeping, but radiating calm authority. His gestures were slow, symmetrical, every movement mirroring the balance of Mat. Even joy was ceremonial. To the people outside, he was both protector and mystery. Few would ever see his face clearly. His image, carved into temple walls, was eternal and unchanging. Yet behind those eyes of painted stone lived a man, sometimes weary, sometimes uncertain. A ruler's life was one of immense isolation, even surrounded by attendants. He was alone, bound by ritual and expectation. Every meal, every appearance, every word had meaning beyond itself. He could never be casual, never simply human. The gods had chosen him, and that choice came with silence. In the evenings, when the last petitions were heard and the light had dimmed to gold, the pharaoh often withdrew to his private chambers. The noise of the day faded, replaced by the faint rustle of linen curtains and the drip of water in a bronze basin. Perhaps he would sit by a narrow window, watching the Nile turn silver beneath the moon. Somewhere in the distance, a priest would be chanting for the souls of the dead. Somewhere closer, a scribe would be recording his deeds for eternity. And yet, in that stillness, perhaps even the pharaoh wondered, what did it mean to be divine, and yet so bound to the frailty of breath? Outside, the river moved endlessly, carrying the reflections of stars and the scent of wet earth. Barges drifted past in silence, their oars dipping rhythmically like the beating of a great heart. Beyond the walls, the city of Thebes or Memphis hummed softly, markets closing, children calling, dogs barking in the distance. The pharaoh's world was walled, perfumed, gilded, but beyond those walls, life pulsed in its raw, ordinary rhythm. Fishermen untied their nets. Women ground grain. Farmers spoke prayers to the same gods under the same sky. And yet, in their hearts, they imagined him seated upon his golden throne, face serene, commanding both heaven and earth. To them, his stillness kept the sun rising and the Nile flowing. His heartbeat was the measure of time itself. It was not the man they worshipped, but the idea of balance he represented, the eternal rhythm that made chaos bearable. Inside the great halls, scribes read aloud the decrees of the day. They spoke of taxation, of temple repairs, of trade with Nubia, of offerings to the gods. Each line of ink bound the country together like thread through linen. Bureaucracy in Egypt was as sacred as religion. To record was to preserve. To name was to give life. The hum of writing filled the outer rooms, a soft, continuous sound. The whisper of civilization itself. Further within, dancers moved slowly in the perfumed air, their arms weaving graceful arcs, their steps deliberate, almost meditative. Music, soft harps and flutes, filled the spaces between words. It was said that beauty itself was a form of worship, and so even pleasure became ritual. The court was not simply a place of rule. It was a theater of the eternal. Every fragrance, every sound, every gesture had its place in the choreography of divine order. But beyond the perfection lay fragility. The power of a pharaoh depended on faith, the belief of thousands that he alone could maintain balance between chaos and harmony. Should famine strike, or the Nile fail to flood, that faith could tremble. And so, even as he was revered, he was watched. The priests, the nobles, the scribes, all eyes rested upon him, reading his silences, interpreting his moods, guarding the delicate fabric of the realm. In this way, the pharaoh's court was less a home than a stage. Every day was a performance before gods and men, every night a momentary retreat behind the curtain. When Edined, he did so with precision, each dish symbolic, each sip of wine sanctified. When he spoke, scribes transcribed his words in real time, ensuring nothing divine was lost. The weight of such existence was enormous, yet he bore it with the serenity carved into his statues. If you stood there now in the echoing silence of a ruined palace, where the columns lie broken and the floors are open to the sky, you might still sense that atmosphere. The air would be dry, smelling faintly of dust and old perfume. The hieroglyphs on the walls would glimmer under the faintest light, depicting processions that ended thousands of years ago. You might almost hear the murmur of distant music, the rustle of linen, the scrape of sandals on polished stone. The chord is gone, but its rhythm lingers. Egypt never truly loses its echoes, for in those halls of perfumed stillness, power was not loud, and faith was not questioned. Life was ceremony. Breath itself was sacred, and through that calm, through the weight of gold and the hush of reverence, one truth shimmered quietly. The ancient Egyptians understood that eternity begins not in the heavens, but in the stillness of order. in the measured grace of each passing moment. In the end, the world of ancient Egypt was never about the gold or the gods, or even the pyramids that still hold their breath beneath the desert sun. It was about the endurance of human will, the strange, stubborn desire to build something that might outlast dust. Every block of limestone lifted beneath the glare of the sky was a declaration against the fleetingness of life. Every chisel mark, every prayer, every drop of sweat carried the same unspoken message. We were here. For the tomb builders, it was the ache of survival. They labored in the dark, surrounded by stone and silence, carving eternity for men whose names they would never share. Yet, in their rhythm, the sound of hammer on rock, the songs that echoed softly through tunnels, there was dignity. They worked for gods and kings, but also for something beyond them. The idea that death could be defeated through memory, that the soul, properly prepared, could pass through the veil unbroken. And for the rulers, for Hatshepsut, for the pharaohs, for the faces now worn smooth by time, their empires were more than vanity. They were acts of faith, not in themselves, but in order, in the fragile promise that civilization could be built from chaos, that the flood of the Nile could be tamed by ritual and will. They ruled not merely to control, but to preserve the delicate balance of Mat. The belief that every heart, every grain of sand, every breath of wind had its place in the universe's grand design. The book of the dead whispered of judgment, of hearts weighed against feathers, of gods who watched and measured. To modern ears it sounds distant, even strange, but to the Egyptians it was comfort. The idea that death was not an ending, but a crossing, that the river of the soul would continue flowing, just as the Nile did through the heart of their world. Their faith was not in survival of the body, but in the endurance of story. A kind of immortality that even the tomb dust could not silence. And within the pharaoh's court, the perfumed stillness, the measured gestures, the endless ceremonies, power itself was revealed for what it truly was. Fragile theater. Even the god-kings, seated on their golden thrones, could not escape the loneliness of command. They ruled over lives and lands, yet remained captives of their own divinity. Beneath the headdress and the incense, they too were mortal, haunted by the same question that lingers across all centuries. Will anything we build truly last? When we look at Egypt now, the sand, the stone, the scattered remnants of greatness, we see both the triumph and the futility of human ambition. The temples stand the names are half remembered. The river still flows, unconcerned. Yet somehow, across thousands of years, their voices remain. Their gods still gaze down from broken walls. Their stories still travel in the wind. Perhaps that is what immortality really means, not living forever,